Astral Pet Store. Chapter 31. Necro Girl. After selecting a phalanx, the small skull turned over in the pile of bones to find several other short bones, such as sharp teeth, replacing them with their knees, arms, etc., through the grey energy of the body, turn these bones into their own bones. While the small skeleton was picking bones, the lightning mouse on the other side fell into a bitter fight. Under the temptation of Lei Ying's afterimage, Lei Guangshu escaped several times, but every time he approached the humanoid skeleton, he was sensed by him, and his counterattack was extremely fast. The lightning mouse relied on thunder flash, teleporting to the tricky direction and breaking with lightning, but just after hitting the humanoid skeleton, he was also reacted by the opponent and quickly shredded. One hit for one life. The gap between the lightning mouse and the human skeleton is too big. Under normal circumstances it is completely a character that is spiked. Fortunately, Su Ping can be resurrected indefinitely. As long as the lightning mouse can nibble each other, it can slowly consume it. Despite the fierce fighting of this humanoid skull, it seems that the IQ is low. Under the repeated rebirth of the lightning mouse, it still fights against it without any meaning of retreating. After a few minutes, most of the dark turbidity on the humanoid skull has faded away, and his movements have gradually slowed down, not as sharp as before. At this time, Su Ping sensed that there was a belligerent thought coming from the little skeleton on the side, and it was very strong. Then he saw a small black figure hurried to the battlefield. Su Ping looked closely. It was the small skull. However, the appearance of the small skull at this moment is slightly different from the previous one. Although the body height is still the same, the body is slightly black, and the bones such as arms and knees have become sharp and darker in color. The biggest difference is the speed of running. Compared with the previous stumble, it is now walking steadily, and it is almost catching up with the speed of the thunder mouse. The humanoid skeleton is entangled with two thunderlight mice, and the score is unclear due to the interference of the afterimage of thunder shadow. When the small skeleton came, it suddenly felt, turned around, and suddenly roared, rushing towards the small skeleton. At this moment, the small skull is no longer neglected at will, and it can be crushed. Faced with the fight of the human-shaped skull, the small skull turned and evaded extremely flexibly, but just after avoiding the first arm, it was swept over by the second arm in a weird posture and shattered the body. Among the broken skeletons, there are several bones that are extremely hard and remain intact on the ground. Su Ping heard the prompt of the system, only to know that the small skeleton was dead, and could not piece together to regenerate. He could only choose to resurrect. Despite being spiked, compared with the previous, the progress of the small skull has been very large. Contained by the small skeleton, the mad thunder mouse quickly attacked, and several thunders split on the human-shaped skeleton, annihilating the dark turbidity again. 5 minutes later, with the cooperation of the small skull and the lightning mouse, this humanoid skull was quickly beheaded, and the whole body of dark air was exhausted. The small skeleton picked from its bones, while the lightning mouse and Su Ping were tired and sat on the ground to rest. Call. Suddenly, the wind rose. Su Ping looked around while resting. Suddenly he saw the depths of the woods, and there seemed to be a rush of darkness. When the distance was hundreds of meters, I suddenly discovered that a wave of darkness had hit me. The billowing black wave smoke, there seemed to be ghosts crying and howling, faintly could see some horrible figures flying and swimming in the black mist. What is this? Su Ping was stunned. The next moment, the wave swept over. Su Ping suddenly felt his body cold, and the vitality of his whole body passed quickly. At the next moment, he came to the dark resurrection space. Resurrection in place. Su Ping did not choose random, but wanted to see what the black mist was. As soon as he was resurrected, the dark mist still spread in front of him. Before he could take a closer look, he found that his body was chilling again, and he quickly returned to the resurrection space. Resurrection. Su Ping still chose to stay on the spot, and he did not believe in evil. After resurrecting more than 10 times in a row, when Su Ping was resurrected again, there was a faint whiz in the dark mist. Then, the black mist suddenly retreated, and Su Ping saw a ghostly figure flying over her face. The face was a beautiful girl. The beauty was so suffocating that she couldn't find any flaws. Su Ping had seen it so far. The most beautiful girl ever. But from the bottom of the chest, the girl's body was a dry skeleton, and it seemed that she could see scarlet internal organs and black mist. The dark mist girl's complexion is extremely pale, her delicate alluring face seems to be old, and Su Ping slowly looks at her. Her green eyes show interesting colors, but she is also full of monsters. Su Ping was calm and fearless. He didn't die anyway. There was nothing to say. He was also looking up and down at each other, his eyes unbridled, and even wanted to squeeze her body twice to see if it had texture. Can't identify. Su Ping lost an appraisal technique, but didn't see any information, and suddenly became more interested. This is obviously a higher life. At this moment, the girl of black mist suddenly spoke a string of language, which was very strange and jerky, like the call of the dead. Su Ping didn't understand it and was about to ask. Suddenly, he saw the girl raise her hand and waved, and the black mist around him suddenly came. Su Ping returned to the resurrection space again. He was a little strange, immediately resurrected in situ, and saw the black mist girl again. When the other party saw him, he was obviously surprised for a while, and then the strange color in his eyes became more intense. He flew gently and came close to Su Ping. Su Ping blinked and suddenly reached out to her chest. Soft as fog. To be precise, this is essentially a fog. Ha! As soon as he sighed, Su Ping saw the black mist girl frown, her body chilled again, and she returned to the resurrection space. Fortunately, such death is not painful. Su Ping still chose to resurrect in situ. The black mist girl looked at Su Ping, who appeared again out of thin air, startled, and slowly fell into contemplation. Do you have wisdom? Can you understand me? Su Ping asked curiously. It's rare to see humanoids, maybe you can find some strange things. The black mist girl slowly looked at him, and suddenly thought of something. The green light in her eyes flashed. She lightly opened her lips. Su Ping suddenly felt the heat and energy of her body, all turned into pale golden energy floating into her mouth. Soon, Su Ping died again. Without hesitation, resurrect again. The black mist girl was not surprised this time, but still opened her mouth and continued to absorb Su Ping's life energy. Resurrection, resurrection, resurrection. Su Ping was resurrected 7 or 8 times and found that the black mist girl had never stopped. He asked nothing. After arriving, Su Ping finally relieved himself. This girl regarded him as an inedible food. Angrily, Su Ping was too lazy to explore what happened, and chose to resurrect directly. As soon as he was resurrected, Su Ping discovered that the surrounding scene was different from any other time before. This is a huge palace. However, the palace seems to be made of huge white bones and is extremely grand. When I came back late, I still encountered an inexhaustible thing, which was delayed. I will make up for it on Wednesday, why not? Astral Pet Store. Chapter 32. The King of Bones. This is the residence of the higher intelligent life of the necromancer. Su Ping looked at the white bone palace curiously, and was able to build a palace to live in. It can be seen that the owner is extremely extraordinary. Moreover, the huge white bone used for construction is too majestic and majestic. It is difficult to imagine how scary creatures he would be. It seems to be the front door. Su Ping walked forward. He felt that the air here was more depressive than outside, so deadly. The air was filled with a strong smell of rotting, and a weird smell. After walking for more than 10 meters, Su Ping suddenly saw nothing, and felt a tearing feeling emerge from the body out of thin air, tearing his body apart and annihilating into nothingness. Resurrection. As soon as his eyes turned black, Su Ping looked around and searched for his target. Boom. His body burst suddenly again. Resurrection. Su Ping once again recovered as before. Burst. Resurrection. I rely on. Boom. Resurrection. Just after Su Ping was resurrected this time, he saw that the space in front of him suddenly twisted, and a mass of dark energy emerged in the twist, gradually sketching his human form. This is a tall woman with a very hot body. She looks more mature, full-bodied, and full of charm. She has a black symbol like a fishhook on her forehead, and behind it are 8 dark wings, gently patting, like a fallen angel in mythology. Su Ping lost an appraisal technique in the past. There is no suspense, nothing is seen. Ha! The black-winged angelic woman raised her eyebrows and looked at Su Ping up and down, then tentatively, gently. Boom! Su Ping's body burst. Resurrection. Seeing Su Ping recover, the black-winged angel woman was a little surprised, and then a little more. This time the energy of a green skull flying out of her fingertips swallowed Su Ping's body in one bite. Su Ping felt that his body was melting, his whole body was broken down, and nothing was left. Resurrection. Su Ping stood on the spot again, but his face was already black, and the other party seemed to regard him as a mouse, trying to kill him in different ways. Your sister, can you communicate well? Su Ping was angry. Boom. The body burst again. Resurrection. Su Ping-chi gritted his teeth. He was on the bar with this guy. Yes, it is the iron, some kind of kill me. Bang bang bang. After several bursts in a row, when Su Ping was resurrected again, he suddenly heard a slightly suspicious, huh? This is a low nasal sound. The sound is very light, but like a thunder, echoed throughout the palace. It seems that the entire time and space are shaking. Su Ping suddenly felt a trembling from the depths of the soul, the body's cold hair erected. There was a terrifying sense of fear. His heart was beating uncontrollably, blood flowed all over his body, and his body shivered slightly. He didn't see anything, but he felt terrified, and something seemed to be triggering his fear. The black-wing angel woman who kept trying in front of him, when she heard the slightly suspicious nasal sound, was suddenly frightened, and hurriedly turned her head, facing the void behind him, the door made of white bones at the end. Bend over and bow your head, kneel in the air. Su Ping found that the body of the black-winged angel woman was shaking with her wings. Whoa. Suddenly, Su Ping felt a sight of sight. Immediately, he and the black-wing angel girl in front of him did not change their body posture and position, but they appeared in front of a throne of white bones, which seemed to be moved by Modawali. I saw the steps made of white bones in front, all made up of a piece of bone, scattered with the heads of various creatures, and some skulls have curved corners on top, like a devil's head. On the ladder, there is a sword-like bone throne with a sharp sword. The armrests on both sides of the throne are two large skulls and some small skulls. On the throne leaned against a majestic figure hazy in the dark, with dark energy flowing all over the body, elbows on the throne armrest, his wrist's bare skin was pale. He leaned his head and looked down on the living beings. The indifferent eyes opened slightly, and inside were a pair of dark, emotionless eyes. Su Ping raised his head and looked up, facing these indifferent eyes that looked through the ages, and suddenly felt cold all over his body, with a strong fear, and the fear of bowing down. But as soon as this thought came up, he was strangled by him. Thinking of being immortal, Su Ping gritted his teeth and straightened his waist bar, and asked, "Are you the head here?" At the moment he spoke, the black-winged angel woman shivering and kneeling in the void, her frightened wings up, she waved her hand quickly, and a band of dark energy sealed Su Ping's mouth like tape. But she quickly bowed her head and made a guilt to the king above her head, but she couldn't understand the language of Su Ping. Boom. Suddenly, without warning, Su Ping's body burst. Su Ping was forced. Why are these big shots unpredictable? He was a little angry, and he was resurrected immediately. The king on the bones saw Su Ping, who was resurrected, and his indifferent eyes, seeming to squint slightly. Boom. Su Ping burst again. Resurrection. Burst again. Resurrect again. My Mima, can you still talk about things? Boom. Resurrection. This time, Su Ping didn't die immediately. He rushed toward the opponent directly on the bone ladder. Wang Hu Jiang Xiangning is kind of. Knowing that he is a ants compared to the other party, it is impossible to cause damage, but Su Ping still wants to rush to give him a punch. If not to fight back, wouldn't it be dead? Seeing Su Ping trying to get close to Thicking, the dark angel woman's face changed greatly. Her expression also became a little grim and angry. Her whole body a dark energy surged, and this time she shot her strongest attack directly. With her full shot, even if Su Ping is 100 times stronger, it is enough to die 10,000 times. However, before her attack came out, suddenly her body contracted, seeming to be caught by something, making a bone fracture, and then her body was thrown aside, like a winged bird, hitting the white bone of the hall stone pillars. Su Ping was furious, unaware of the movement next to him, and quickly rushed to the steps and stood in front of the throne. This process was surprisingly smooth and was not prevented at all. I go to Nemo. Su Ping raised his hand and smashed it with a punch. But the fist suddenly stopped, and his body became stiff, unable to move. Back in time and space. Suddenly, an indifferent voice sounded in Su Ping's mind, as if it was from the person on the throne in front of him. But Su Ping never saw his lips move. What is it? Su Ping hadn't heard of it, but most guessed it was related to his resurrection. Can you reverse the time and space of the necromancer? Who are you, or who is behind you? The indifferent voice said slowly, with an indifferent prestige. None of your business. Su Ping couldn't move his mouth, but he turned back in his head. Boom. His body burst. Resurrection. Just after Su Ping was resurrected, he found that his body had recovered his ability to move. He was irritated in his heart, knowing that the person in front of him was extremely terrifying, but his repeated killing was still very irritating. At this moment, he suddenly glanced at the throne beside this man's thigh. There was a blood-red bead, the size of a baby fist, what seemed to be a baby. Even if it's an ordinary gem, it's very valuable. Su Ping didn't think about it, and immediately bent over. Boom. The body burst again. Resurrection. After resurrection, Su Ping maintained the stooped posture before death, and Su Ping bent down a bit again. Boom. Resurrection. Bend down again. When he was resurrected for the 5th time, Su Ping was very close to the blood-red orb, and he suddenly shouted in his consciousness, I said. The body did not burst. And his palm also grabbed the blood-red orb in an instant. Close. The orb disappears and is transferred to the storage space. The other party saw Su Ping's intention, but did not expect that Su Ping actually had storage treasures on it. You know, the moment he noticed Su Ping, he had completely destroyed this tiny life. See-through, nothing can hide his eyes. I say you MMP. Su Ping rejoiced when he got the orb, and swears unkindly. Astral Pet Store. Chapter 33. Run after scolding. Boom. At the moment when Su Ping's swearing broke out, his body exploded suddenly, smashing it to the utmost, leaving no smoke and dust, and completely annihilated. The eyes on the throne were slightly cold. Although he could not understand Su Ping's language, it did not prevent him from feeling Su Ping's evil thoughts. This foolish teasing made him once again loathe the ignorance of the lower race. After a little punishment, he intends to wait for Su Ping to come back to life again, directly strip the soul of this tiny life, find the truth in person, and imprison this foolish soul under his throne forever. However, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 minute passed. The void in front of him was still calm, but Su Ping's figure did not appear again. The figure on the throne frowned slightly, and when he was slightly puzzled, his eyes suddenly moved. His dark eyes seemed to see through the void in an instant. His body, which was always sitting still, stood up suddenly at this moment. Boom. The palace was turbulent, shaking in time and space. The world domineering of Sui Tuo was revealed from his body, as if to penetrate the whole world. The undead life within tens of thousands of miles of this majestic huge bone palace, all felt the anger from the king, and they were all terrified and trembling. Time and space transfer, actually time and space transfer. This monstrous figure, with black eyes, penetrated the hall and shot into the distant sky. The 2 laws of supremacy are displayed at the same time. The distance of one transfer is beyond my domain. Who is it? Who is it? The black-winged angel girl who fell on the side of the white bone demon hall slowly climbed up and saw that Wong was actually angry, and his eyes were full of shock. This has been tens of thousands of years, even hundreds of thousands of years. I have not seen Wong angry. The king was furious, blood ran for thousands of miles, and the ghosts were crying. Shi's figure bowed his head, the flames of the whole body were surging, and his eyes were like a black hole. Give me the life just now and bring it back. The black wing angel girl hurriedly bowed her head, trembling. Observe my king. After talking, she bowed her head and waited for 2 seconds. When there was no new order, her body instantly turned into a black mist and disappeared in the demon palace. Being able to exert 2 laws of supremacy at the same time, in addition to the few old guys who were dusted in ancient times, who else can it be? They came back from the cursed old world. The figure of Shi did not seem to notice the black wing woman's leave, frowning, muttering to himself. Random resurrection. After swearing, Su Pingren received death, no surprise, and this time he directly chose to resurrect randomly. It's really cool to run after scolding. Su Ping let out a bad breath and felt that all his paws were soothing. Especially when I thought that the other party was a big guy. I was sprayed by myself, but I couldn't find him to settle the accounts anymore. I even wanted to laugh. Do you think I will go back to death in a silly resurrection? It's naive. Su Ping sneered slightly. However, the sarcasm is ridiculous. This move is still very thrilling. Fortunately, the other party is too confident and arrogant. He mistakenly thinks that he will be resurrected every time, so he arbitrarily squeezes to death. If it is known that Su Ping can be resurrected at random, the other party will use confinement to slowly torture him to collapse. I hope that I won't meet again at random in the future, or I will have to commit suicide as soon as possible. Su Ping secretly said. He felt that he should find some self-defense suicide weapon to be close to him, otherwise he would like to die but could not die. The enemy, who has been ravaged all the time, is too tortured. The most important thing is that if he has been ravaged, his precious cultivation time will be wasted. At this time, the scene around Su Ping gradually became clear, and he had been randomly resurrected to another place. There are still 3 blood moons above the head. The sky is crimson and gloomy, but around Su Ping is a huge mountain of bones. There are no flowers, grass and rocks on the mountain, which are made up of massive bones. Click. Su Ping's foot moved slightly and broke a hand bone. This bone seems weathered for thousands of years and is extremely fragile. Su Ping has slowly adapted to the style of this chaotic necromancer, and he is resistant to this terrifying sight like hell. He resurrected the lightning rat and the skeleton with ease, and these 2 guys were killed in the dark fog before. Now, due to the contract, they can be resurrected directly beside him. Lei Guangshu saw the sun and the surrounding mountain scenes, and his hair was horrified, but this time, he did not have the anxiety and fear as before, and soon entered a state of vigilance, and the rat eyes went around. After repeated stimulations of killing intention, Su Ping found that the thunderbolt had more guts than before. After the small skull came out, he looked around dumbly, and then the empty eyes fell on the pile of bones on the ground. It immediately picked up and sighed, but the bones picked up were almost unsatisfactory, and they were lost after a glance. Go and see if there are any enemies. Su Ping ordered Lei Guangshu with his mind. The lightning mouse was a little dissatisfied and hesitant, but he stepped on the pile of bones lightly and explored the surroundings. Su Ping looked at the small skull picking the bones, and suddenly thought of the blood ruby that he grabbed from the throne of the bone. He moved his heart and immediately took it out of the storage space. The blood ruby fell into his hands, a little warm. During the previous grabbing, Su Ping hurried into the storage space, and did not have time to feel it carefully. But at the moment, he was surprised to find that the blood ruby seemed to be alive and would jump and tremble slightly. Sure enough, it's not a mere thing. Su Ping was surprised. At this time, the small skull next to the bone was picked up suddenly, and his empty eye socket looked closely at the blood ruby in Su Ping's hand. From the consciousness of the small skull, Su Ping felt an extremely strong desire. This eagerness is 10 times and 100 times stronger than when the humanoid skeleton was seen before. If it were not for the absolute suppression of contractual forces, Su Ping suspected that it would rush over directly. You want? Su Ping raised his eyebrows. The small skull was so eager. This thing is mostly useful to it, and it is right to think about it. This is an item in the necrosphere, and it is also normal to be useful for undead creatures such as the small skull. Thinking of the main task of nurturing, Su Ping hesitated, or threw things to it. Anyway, this little guy is also himself. The small skull quickly held the blood ruby. The red light of the gem seemed to reflect the scarlet color of its eye sockets. It almost didn't hesitate. He just stuffed this thing into his mouth, and directly down the mouth, crammed into an empty head. After it let go, the blood ruby was suspended in its skull, and there were faint red threads, which followed the gray energy in the head, and flowed into its brain, and then followed the brain to the bones of the whole body. It is the same as the blood vessel. Su Ping looked a little surprised, and once again lost an appraisal technique to the small skull. Astral Pet Store. Chapter 34. Comprehend. Small skull. Attribute: Demon Beast. Level: First Order Median. Combat Strength: 2.8. Qualification: Inferior. Ability to control: Reorganization of broken limbs. It is still a very simple attribute panel, and the ability is only a racial basic ability of a skeleton. But, compared with the previous ones, the change of the small skull is very huge. The first is that the combat power has increased from weak to hell 1.1 to 2.8, which is a huge leap. You know, 1.1 is equivalent to the fighting level of ordinary humans, but 2.8 can easily hunt tigers and beasts. The gap between them is self-evident. Secondly, in the place where the undead of chaos necromancers survived, the little skeleton did not practice much, but the level was raised from the first order lower position to the medium position, which is also a small progress. Qualifications have been upgraded from inferior to inferior, and at the first order medium level, the outbreak of nearly 3-tier combat power can be regarded as very good and excellent, but under the strict standards of the system, it can only be regarded as poor. Su Ping smiled bitterly and felt a bit of frustration at the thought of the middle and upper level mission requirements. However, I thought of the teleportation to the Chaos Undead realm. Although they died many times repeatedly, so far, they have only stayed here for 2 or 3 hours. It has been very good to increase to this level in such a short time. Whoa. Suddenly, the lightning mouse ran back from a distance, sending a signal of vigilance and tension. Su Ping immediately recovered, his eyes narrowed, and he saw a pile of bones behind the lightning mouse, chasing a huge crawling skeleton. The skeleton is nearly 5 meters long, looks like a beast, and looks like a twisted person. The body is made up of the skeletons of various creatures. Its limbs crawl quickly, chasing the lightning mouse. Seeing the monster, Su Ping was not nervous. Instead, he quickly became serious and immediately displayed his killing intention, skill, go. The fled Li Wang mouse suddenly turned red, his teeth grinned, a sudden break stopped, and he turned on the whole body to generate electricity, and rushed back towards the huge skeleton. Su Ping turned his head to look at the small skull at his feet. It was still standing blankly, but unlike the previous sluggishness, it seemed to be immersed in a comfortable enjoyment, and the grey mist around its body was wrapped in hell ability, flowing in all the bones of the body. These bones become more and more dense under the spread of grey energy and blood gas. Feeling that the small skull seemed to be digesting the blood ruby, Su Ping thought for a while. Instead of sending it to fight, he let the lightning rat fight alone. The fighting power of this huge crawling skeleton is obviously better than that of the human-shaped skeleton encountered earlier. The speed of the lightning mouse is obviously too late to respond, but fortunately it has mastered the 10 secret skills of Thunder Flash, which gives it a leapfrog enemy the possibility, coupled with the infinite resurrection of Su Ping, weakened little by little, and played a protracted war of attrition. Boom. Under hundreds of consecutive resurrections, the lightning mouse suddenly ejected a beam of thunder, like a thunder. When it was several meters apart, the lightning had already split on the crawling skeleton. Su Ping was taken aback for a moment. This attack trick, he had never seen it before. After losing his appraisal technique, Su Ping suddenly saw that there was a new ability called Flying Thunderbolt in the lightning mouse's ability column. Medium thunder ability is usually mastered by thunder flying beasts. This little guy actually forced it out. After seeing it, Su Ping couldn't help but smile. Although it is of medium ability, but it is very capable of long-range attacks. Not bad. It can be seen from this that this little guy was really forced to hurry under the situation of continuous close-up attack by Thunder Flash before he came up with such a long-range attack. Under the circumstance of mastering Flying Thunderbolt, the lightning mouse's combat power has also reached 4.3, which is comparable to many Tier 4 pets. About an hour later, the crawling skeleton finally fell to the ground. The dark turbidity of his body was exhausted, and there was no energy to repair the broken bone, and the lightning mouse disassembled the entire body. After crawling the skull down, the small skull trot over and picked it up in the pile of bones, but this time it did not pick the bones to replace itself, but selected a sharper bone in it and grabbed it back. Su Ping saw the appearance of the small skull holding the sharp bone knife, and seemed to wear it as a battle sword. Surprised, he couldn't help but feel funny. I don't know what this thing does for it. It seems that it takes a lot of time to digest. Su Ping glanced at the blood ruby in the skull of the small skull, and was a little curious. The blood gas in this blood ruby was constantly absorbed by the small skull, which seemed to be slightly shrinked a little. Su Ping didn't have a rest, and let the lightning mouse go to the neighborhood to find its prey and seduce it. The lightning mouse dragged his body reluctantly and left. It didn't take long before he ran back in panic. He suddenly attracted two strangle-looking skulls, one like a beast and the other a human-shaped skull, but the volume huge, 4 or 5 meters high, awkward, and holding a huge skeleton in his hand. It serves as a shield. These skeletons obviously also have simple wits, some of which may be the residual consciousness in the bones, so they know how to use equipment. Su Ping immediately let the small skeleton and the lightning mouse play together. The small skeleton waved the small bone knife and rushed towards the sensitive crawling skeleton. When they saw the little skull, the two skeletons seemed to be attracted by something. At the same time, they gave up the attack on the lightning mouse and turned their heads to rush towards the little skeleton. The small skeleton brandished a small bone knife and hacked on the crawling skeleton, but failed to cut its bones. Instead, it was hit by the skeleton that swept over. The body flew out suddenly, but its body seemed to be much tougher than before. Fall apart. Su Ping threw out his appraisal technique and saw that the fighting strength of this crawling skeleton reached 5.2, which was far better than that of the small skeleton and the lightning mouse. I saw that the crawling skeleton rushed to the small skull in a hurry, biting its whole body with its mouth open, chewing and shaking it with a big mouth, and seemed to want to eat it. But the giant skeleton followed. The skeleton shield in his hand hit the crawling skeleton heavily and rescued the small skeleton from his mouth. Then, the giant skeleton stepped on the foot and threw the body of the small skeleton about to fall apart in the entrance. The whole body was dark and turbulent, and it seemed to assimilate the entire body of the small skeleton. Click. The small skull's body shattered, and the blood rubies in its skull also fell out, floating into the head of the giant skull. At the same time, Su Ping also received a reminder of resurrection. He froze for a moment, but he didn't expect that after the death of the small skull, this blood ruby would fall out. Was it not caused by complete absorption? Without much thought, Su Ping quickly resurrected the small skeleton and let it cooperate with the lightning rod to focus on the giant skeleton. In fact, in addition to the small skull and the thunderbolt, the crawling skeleton hit by the shield also turned and rushed to the giant skeleton to compete for the blood ruby. With thunder flash, drill directly into its brain and bring the gems out. Su Ping conveyed his meaning to the lightning mouse. The lightning mouse received his meaning, and his body flashed continuously, directly appearing in the giant skull of the giant skull, biting the gemstone, and then flashing on his body, leaving the skull, flashing twice in a row, and appeared in front of the Su plane. Su Ping took the blood ruby in his mouth and directly collected it into the storage space. Although this thing is useful for small skulls, with the current constitution of small skulls, it seems that it is not a matter of time and effort to absorb this thing. In case they suddenly die, this thing is fancy by other powerful existence, then grab it again. Not coming back. You can only wait until you are free, and then slowly absorb it. By the way, let the system identify it. What the hell is this? Su Ping thought inwardly. He looked up. Without blood rubies, two crawling skeletons, the melee also stopped, and their eyes fell on Su Ping and Lei Guangshu again, and immediately threw them fiercely. Kill. Su Ping let the lightning mouse and the small skeleton kill at the same time. Astral Pet Store. Chapter 35. I once crossed the skeleton mountain and the sea of blood. Under countless resurrections, the two skeletons were finally killed by the lightning mouse and the small skeleton. Su Ping did not stop, and took the lightning mouse and the small skeleton to continue to look for other prey on this huge skeleton mountain, although they are the weakest existence here. When the physical strength is not enough, Su Ping relies on the resurrection to get full. When the spirit feels tired, it recovers by suicide. One person led a mouse and a skeleton, and fought along the skeleton mountain until they encountered a creature that was so strong and unmatched that they had to reincarnate to another place, and then set out to fight again. Time is running. 3 days have passed. Su Ping can't remember how many times he has been resurrected or how many places he has visited randomly. He remembers that there are skeleton mountains piled high, there are black forests consuming life energy, and there are thousands of blood seas full of blood bubbles. He has seen all kinds of undead creatures. Some are brave and twisted, some are beautiful and charming, some are weak like ordinary skeletons, and their combat power is not more than 5 points, and some are so unimaginable that they are as big as giant mountains. In general, I can't see the whole picture at all. In such a sinister environment, Su Ping, the lightning mouse, and the small skull are also growing rapidly. Boom. The spooky ghosts of the two faces have not yet approached, and the pale and transparent body is suddenly shrouded by a large group of thunder, annihilating on the spot. A purple figure jumped out. The lightning current rushed in the hair of the whole body, lightly landed, walking the dexterous catwalk, walking through the place where the ghost was annihilated, and continued to move forward. Behind it, one person and one skeleton followed. Compared with 3 days ago, the appearance of the lightning mouse has not changed much, but the color of the hair is darker, and the hair also contains rich lightning energy. After all, its own level is only 2 levels, and in the case of continuously playing many advanced thunder skills, it has a great burden on its own energy. Therefore, as soon as it realized that thunder break, it has slowly learned a higher and deeper energy storage method, compressing the energy in the body to the extreme, filling every part of the body, only the total storage of lightning energy in the body. It is no less than the thunder beast of the 5th or 6th order. Undead fruit. Su Ping suddenly saw a few dark-colored hell fruits hanging on a gray strange tree ahead. The surface of these fruits has the outline of a human face. It is a favorite of a few demonic beasts. It contains the power of the undead and can be bought in very few places in the Federation. After all, each fruit here represents a life. Attack. Su Ping withdrew his gaze, and did not hesitate to let the lightning rat attack the fruit tree. Upon receiving Su Ping's thoughts, the lightning mouse immediately flashed all over his body, gathered a ball of thunder, and suddenly flew at the root of the fruit tree. Boom. At the moment when the thunderball was approaching, the rhizomes under the fruit tree burst out of the ground, blasting towards the thunderball, and immediately burst the thunderball, but a few roots were also burnt and unable to land. Boom, boom, boom. The lightning rat continued to bomb with thunder and lightning. The roots and stems of this fruit tree were getting fewer and fewer. Finally, it was unable to parry. It was hit by the trunk and smashed a burnt black mark. Hearing a screaming cry under the tree, Su Ping didn't show any mercy. This undead tree specializes in preying on other lives. Even some skeletons and ghosts will become its fertilizer, and the thunder beast is its nemesis. Soon, the fruit tree was completely broken, and Su Ping stepped forward to pick up the few undead fruits and collect them in the storage space. The space is almost full. Looking at the storage space that could not be filled quickly, Su Ping frowned slightly. It was the favorite food he had collected in the past 3 days, and there were 2 days of cultivation time in the back. I could always collect some more. This space is just afraid not enough. System, can the storage space be upgraded? Su Ping asked silently. Can. How much energy is required? Each cubic meter of expansion requires 100 points of energy. It is good. Su Ping didn't bargain because it didn't work at all. He decisively used the remaining energy to upgrade the storage space. This time he came to the top nurturing plane of 9,000 energy tickets to purchase. He didn't want to miss some favors because of insufficient storage space. Unfortunately, the pets collected here are almost all unpopular pets in the devil department. They are not sold in general places, and no one buys them. It takes more time to ship them. Su Ping thought secretly. Picking good fruits, Su Ping continued to explore forward. After accidentally being attacked and killed several times, Su Ping also explored this area almost, and chose to resurrect again randomly and switch to another place to continue. The 5th day. Almost over. In front of a steep cliff, Su Ping looked at the muddy sea of corpses ahead, in which countless bones and corpses were immersed, which rose and fell as the seawater rippled. Su Ping has long been immune to this purgatory scene. At his feet, 2 little figures stood quietly. Compared with 5 days ago, their appearance changes are not much different. The change of the small skull is more obvious. The bones of its body have changed from gray and white to a deep dark black, and there is blood flow hidden in the bones. It seems the veins are the same. The small skull still reached Su Ping's knee and did not grow tall. In his hand was a sharp bone knife, more precisely a dagger. And this bone knife comes from a skull monster with a body of nearly 10 meters long, built by its fangs. In just 5 days of experience, the small skeleton has become like a local skeleton in the world of Chaos Undead. The energy released from it is no longer a thin gray energy, but a deep dark turbidity, surrounding the body and bone knife between. No way. Let's go. After blowing the smelly sea breeze for a while, Su Ping slightly withdrew his gaze and turned a sharp tooth from his sleeve. This sharp tooth is relatively sharp, and there is a faint dark turbidity on it. Puff. Su Ping's expression was natural and he stabbed the sharp blade on his chest. When he felt the pain, he grinned slightly. It's miscalculated, it's too light. His body fell to the ground with a thump. Looking at the crimson sky, feeling the rapid flow of blood, Su Ping was sighing in his heart. This is simply delaying time. The lightning mouse and the small skeleton looked at him blankly, anxiously, but they didn't know how to help. Although such scenes have happened many times, but every time I feel the life of the master is weak, the force from the contract will make him very anxious and want to do something. It didn't take long for another person, a rat, and a skeleton to appear out of thin air in another place in the chaos necromancer. After a brief look, they took a fierce attack on the surrounding undead creatures. Taohuashi Street, a small naughty pet shop. The roller shutter door closed tightly, and the store was dark. Suddenly, a vortex appeared in the shop out of thin air, and then spit out 3 figures from inside. When the whirlpool gradually disappeared, a pair of black eyes opened, and after seeing a store that had long been unfamiliar, smelling an unprecedented fresh air, Su Ping felt that the whole person seemed to be resurrected from the numbness and recovered his life.